Mavis is a diesel engine who works for the quarry company, shunting trucks and their sidings. She has 6 small wheels hidden by side plates just like Toby's. Mavis is young and full of her own ideas. She loves rearranging things too, and began putting Toby's trucks in different places every day. This made Toby cross. "Trucks," he grumbled, "should be where you want them, when you want them." "Fiddlesticks," said Mavis, and flounced away. At last, Toby lost patience. "I can't waste time playing hunt the trucks with you. Take them yourself." Mavis was pleased. Taking trucks made her feel important. At the station, Diesel oiled up to her. "Toby's an old fusspot," she complained. Diesel sensed trouble and was delighted. "Toby says only steam engines can manage trucks," continued Mavis. "How absurd. Depend upon it, Mavis. Anything steam engines can do, we Diesels can do better." Diesel knew nothing about trucks, but Mavis didn't realise this. Toby's line crosses with the main road behind the station and for a short way follows a farm lane. Frosty weather makes the muddy lane rock hard and very slippery. Toby stops before reaching a lane. His fireman halts the traffic at the crossing and then he sets off again. By using the heavy trucks to push him along, he has no trouble with the frosty rails in the lane. It is the only safe thing to do in this kind of weather. Toby warned Mavis and told her just what to do.
The trucks rattled and screamed. Some cows were grazing nearby. They were not used to trains. The noise and smoke disturbed them. As Edward clanked by, they broke through the fence and ran across the line. A coupling was broken and some trucks were left behind. Edward felt a jerk but didn't take much notice. He was used to trucks. Bother those trucks, he thought. Why can't they come quietly? He was at the next station before either he or his driver realized what had happened. When Gordon and Henry heard about the accident, they laughed and boasted. Fancy allowing cows to break his train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. Toby was cross. You couldn't help it, Edward. They've never met cows. I have, and I know the trouble they are. Some days later, Gordon rushed through Edward's station. "Hoop, hoop, find the cows." "Hurry, hurry, hurry," puffed Gordon. "Don't make such a fuss, don't make such a fuss," grumbled his coaches. A long stretch of line lay. "Oh, my gears and axles," he groaned, toiling up the hill. "I'll never be the same bus again." "Hooray, hooray, I see him," cheered Bertie as he reached the top. "Oh, no, Edward's at the station." "No? He stopped at a crossing. Hooray, hooray!" Bertie tore down the hill. "Well done, Bertie," shouted his passengers. "Go it!" Bertie skidded into the yard. "Wait, wait!" cried Bertie. He was just in time to see Edward puff away. "I'm sorry," said Bertie. "Never mind," said the passengers. "After him quickly. Third time lucky, you know. Do you think we'll catch him at the next station, driver?" "There's a good chance," replied the driver. "Our road keeps close to the line and we can climb hills better than Edward. I'll just make sure." He spoke to the station master. Bertie and the passengers waited impatiently. "Yes, we'll do it this time," said the driver. "Hooray!" called the passengers, as Bertie chased after Edward once more. Set off for the station. "Broken up, what a shame. Broken up, what a shame. I must help Trevor, I must." He thought of all his friends who liked engines, but strangely none of them would have room for a traction engine at home. It's a shame, he hissed. Then, beep, beep! Why didn't I think of him before? There, on the platform, was the very person. "Hello, Edward. You look upset. What's the matter, Charlie?" he asked the driver. "There's a traction engine in the scrapyard, Vicar. He'll be broken up next week. Jem Cole says he never drove a better engine. Do save him, sir. He saws wood and gives children rides. We'll see, replied the vicar. Jem Cole came on Saturday. The Reverend's coming to see you, Trevor. Maybe he'll buy you. Do you think he will? Asked Trevor hopefully. He will when I've lit your fire and cleaned you up. The vicar and his 2 boys arrived that evening. Trevor hadn't felt so happy for months. He chuffered about the yard.
James was
Show your
delighted
paces,
and
Trevor.
puffed away. Here are your trucks, James, said Thomas. Have you got some bootlaces ready? And he ran off, laughing. Oh, said the trucks. We want a proper engine, not a red monster. James took no notice and started as soon as the guard was ready. Come along, he puffed. We won't, screamed the trucks. But James didn't care, and he pulled the screeching truck sternly out of the station. The trucks tried hard to make him give up, but he still kept on. Sometimes their brakes would slip on, and sometimes their axles would run hot, and each time the trouble had to be put right. And each time James would start again, determined not to let them beat him. Give up, you can't pull us, you can't, called the trucks. I can and I will, puffed James, and slowly but surely he pulled them along the line. At last they saw Gordon's Hill. Look out for trouble, James, warned his driver. We'll go fast and get them up before they know it. Don't let them stop you. So James went faster and soon they were halfway up. I'm doing it, he panted. Will the top never come? Then, with a sudden jerk, it all came easier. I've done it, he puffed. Hooray, it's easy now. But his driver shut off steam. The station done it again. We've left our... Pip, pip! Quickly, please, called Thomas. And off they went again. Come along, sang Thomas. We're coming along, sang Annie and Clarabelle. Hurry, panted Thomas. Then he looked ahead. There was Bertie tooting triumphantly on his horn. Oh, dearie me, groaned Thomas. Steady, Thomas, said his driver. We'll beat Bertie yet. We'll beat Bertie yet, echoed Annie and Clarabelle. We'll do it, panted Thomas. Oh, bother, there's a station.
No fear, chuckled James.
Then he heard Bertie. Goodbye, Thomas. You must be tired. Sorry, I can't stop. We buses have to work, you know. Goodbye.
No fear, chuckled James. I'm not so fat
dear,
as you.
thought Thomas. We've lost. I mustn't stick, thought James.
But he felt
Proper
better
thing.
after a drink.
Thomas chuckled and went off with Annie and Clarabelle. Disgraceful, Gordon hissed as he ran backwards to the turntable. The turntable was in a windy place close to the sea, and if he was not on it just right, he put it out of balance and made it difficult to turn. Today, Gordon was in a bad temper, and the wind was blowing fiercely. His driver tried to make him stop in the right place, but Gordon wasn't trying. The fireman tried to turn the handle, but Gordon's weight and the strong wind prevented him. It's no good, they said at last. Your tender upsets the balance. If you were a nice tank engine, you'd be all right. Now you'll have to pull the next train backwards. Look, called some boys, there's a new tank engine. Oh, it's only Gordon, back to front. Hello, called Thomas. Playing tank engines.
What's that you say?
Sensible engine.
The special's waiting.
Tell Edward to take it, please. And Gordon? Oh, leave him where he is. We haven't time to bother with him now. On the other side of the ditch, some little boys were chattering. Coo, doesn't he look silly? They'll never get him out. They began to sing. Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch. Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, all on a Monday morning. Gordon lay in the ditch all day. Oh dear, he thought, I shall never get out. But that evening they lifted Gordon and made a road of sleepers under his wheels to keep him from the mud. Strong ropes were fastened to his back end, and James and Henry, pulling hard, managed to bring him to safety. I seem to know the right line by instinct. Every wise engine knows, of course, that the signalman works the points to make engines run on the right lines, but Gordon was so proud he had forgotten. "Wake up, James," said Gordon next morning. "It's nearly time for the express." "What are you doing? Odd jobs?" "Oh, well, we all have to begin somewhere, don't we? Run along now and get my coaches. Don't be late." James went to get Gordon's coaches. They were all shining with lovely new paint. He was careful not to bump them, and they followed him smoothly into the station, singing happily, "We're going away, we're going away." "I wish I was going with you," said James. "I should love to pull the express and go flying along the line." Gordon, with much noise and blowing of steam, got ready to back onto the train. No, answered the trucks, bumping into each other. "Go on, go on." Before the driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind him. Poor Thomas tried hard to stop them from making him go too fast. Stop pushing, he hissed, but the trucks took no notice. Go on, they giggled in their silly way. "There's the station. Oh dear, what shall I do?" he cried. He rattled straight through and swerved into the goods yard. Thomas shut his eyes. "I must stop." When he opened his eyes, he saw he had stopped just in front of the buffers. There watching him was the Fat Controller. "What are you doing here, Thomas?" he asked. "I brought Edward's trucks," Thomas answered. "Why did you come so fast?" "I didn't mean to. I was pushed," said Thomas. "They're not ugly. They're caterpillars," said Terence. "I can go anywhere. I don't need rails." "I don't want to go anywhere," said Thomas. "I like my rails, thank you." Winter came with dark clouds full of snow. "I don't like it," said Thomas's driver. "A heavy fall is coming. I hope it doesn't stop us." "Huh," said Thomas, "soft stuff, nothing to it." And he puffed on, feeling cold but confident. They finished their journey safely, but by now the country was covered. "You'll need your snowplow for the next journey, Thomas," said his driver. "Huh! Snow is silly soft stuff. It won't stop me." The snowplow was heavy and uncomfortable and made Thomas cross. He shook it and he banged it, and when they got back, it was so damaged that the driver had to take it off. "You're a very naughty engine," he said to Thomas. Next morning, Thomas's driver and fireman came early and worked hard to mend the snowplow, but they couldn't make it fit. Thomas was pleased. "I shan't have to wear it. I shan't have to wear it," he puffed to Annie and Clarabelle. But they were rather worried. "I hope it's all right. I hope it's all right," they whispered to each other. "I am disappointed, Donald. I did not expect such, clumsiness from you. I had decided to send Douglas back and keep you." "I'm sorry, sir," said Donald. "I should think so, too. You have upset my arrangements. Now James will have to help with the goods work, while you have your tender mended. James won't like that." The Fat Controller was right. James grumbled dreadfully. "Anyone would think," said Douglas, "that Donald had his accident on purpose. I'll hear tell about an engine and some tar wagons."
Shut up, said James. It's not funny. He didn't like to be reminded of his own accident. Well,
Hurry
well,
yourself,
well, said
replied
Douglas.
Thomas. Gordon began making his plan. Yes, said Gordon, I will. And almost before the coaches had stopped moving, Gordon reversed quickly and was coupled to the train. Get in quickly, please, he whistled. Thomas usually pushed behind the big trains to help them start, but he was always uncoupled first. This time Gordon started so quickly they forgot to uncouple Thomas. Gordon's chance had come. Come on, puffed Gordon to the coaches. The train went faster and faster, too fast for Thomas. He wanted to stop, but he couldn't. Peep, peep, stop, stop! Hurry, 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 laughed Gordon. You can't get away, laughed the coaches. The drift was deep on the restaurant. Hush, said Donald. I can hear something. Probably the wind, said Douglas.
Help!
No, listen, insisted Donald.
Over here.
Look, it's Thomas. Come on, the poor wee engine must be frozen to the frames in there. When the workmen arrived, it took some time to decide how to dig away the heavy drifts of snow. Thomas's driver and fireman, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, joined the rescue. At last, Thomas and the precious Christmas tree were freed from the snowdrift. Then they set off once more to finish their long journey. The Fat Controller greeted them warmly. As a reward for all your hard work, you may go and enjoy the carols. Be quick now. At the big station, all was soon ready. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with lights. Ladies, gentlemen, and children, I give you 3 cheers for Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends who have made this occasion possible. Wind and rain buffeted Edward. His sanding gear failed, and his fireman rode in front, dropping sand on the rails by hand. Suddenly, Edward's wheels slipped fiercely. With a shrieking crack, something broke. The crew inspected the damage. Repairs took some time. One of your crank pins broke, Edward, said his driver. We've taken your side rods off. Now you're like an old-fashioned engine. Can you get these people home? They must start back tonight. I'll try, sir, promised Edward. Edward puffed and pulled his hardest, but his wheels kept slipping and he could not start the heavy train. The passengers were anxious.
Percy.
Driver, fireman and guard went along the train, making adjustments between the coaches.
Percy.
Later,
We've loosened the
Percy
couplings.
saw Harold. Sorry, Percy, can't talk. I'm on high alert. Why? Bad weather's due. My help's always needed. Mind how you go, Percy. Pah, off, Percy. As long as I've got rails to run on, I can go anywhere in any weather anyhow. Goodbye. He set off for the beach. It was a beautiful day, but Edward was worried. Be careful, he warned. There's a storm coming. A promise is a promise, thought Percy, no matter what the weather. The children had a lovely day, but by tea time, dark clouds loomed ahead. Annie and Clarabelle were glad when Percy arrived. He was just in time. Rain streamed down Percy's boiler. Oh, he shivered and thought of his nice dry shed. Percy.
Edward worked hard all day. The coaches thought he was very kind, and the driver was very pleased. I'm going out again tomorrow, Edward told the other engines that night. What do you think of that? But he didn't hear what they thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once. Next morning, Edward woke up to find nothing had changed. Gordon was still boasting. You watch me, little Edward, as I rush through with the express. That will be a splendid sight for you. Goodbye, little Edward. Look out for me this afternoon. Edward went off to do some shunting. Edward liked shunting. It was fun playing with trucks. He would come up quietly and give them a push. Then he would stop and the silly trucks would go bump into each other. Oh, they cried, whatever is happening? Edward played till there were no more trucks. Then he stopped to rest. Presently he heard a whistle. But next morning Edward looked unhappy. Gordon came clanking past, hissing rudely. Bless me, said the Fat Controller, what a noise. They all hiss me, sir, answered Edward. They say tender engines don't shunt, and last night they said I have black wheels. I haven't, have I, sir? No, Edward, you have nice blue ones, and I'm proud of you. Tender engines do shunt, but all the same, we do need another tank engine here. He went to a workshop, and they showed him all sorts of engines. At last, he saw a smart little green engine with 4 wheels. That's the one, he thought. If I choose you, will you work hard? Oh, sir, yes, sir. That's a good engine. I'll call you Percy. Yes, sir, thank you, sir, said Percy. And the Fat Controller brought him back to the yard. The Fat Controller was having breakfast. He was eating toast and marmalade. The butler came in. Excuse me, sir, you are wanted on the telephone. Bother that telephone, said the Fat Controller. I'm sorry, my dear, he said to his wife. Thomas is in trouble with the police, and I must go at once. At the station, Thomas's driver told the Fat Controller what had happened. Dangerous to the public, indeed. We'll see about that. The Fat Controller spoke to the policeman. But however much he argued with him, it was no good. The law is the law, he said, and we can't change it. The Fat Controller felt exhausted. I'm sorry, driver, he said. It's no use arguing with policemen. We will have to make those cowcatcher things for Thomas, I suppose. Everyone will laugh, sir, said Thomas. They'll say I look like a tram. The Fat Controller stirred. Then he laughed. Well done, Thomas. Why didn't I think of it before? We want a tram engine. When I was on my holiday, I met a nice little engine called Toby. He takes trucks from the farms, but the lorries are taking over most of his work and he needs a change. He has cow catchers and side plates. I'll write to his controller at once. A few days later, Toby arrived. That's a good engine, said the Fat Controller. I see you've brought your coach, Henrietta. He felt just as bad next morning. Henry usually pulled the first train, and Thomas had to get his coaches ready. If Henry is ill, he thought, perhaps I shall pull his train. Thomas ran to find the coaches. Come along, he fussed. There's plenty of time, they grumbled. Thomas took them to the platform and wanted to run round in front at once. But his driver wouldn't let him. Don't be impatient, Thomas. Thomas waited and waited. The people got in. The guard and station master walked up and down. The porter banged the doors, and still Henry didn't come. Thomas got more and more excited. The Fat Controller came to see what was the matter, and the guard and the station master told him about Henry. Find another engine, he ordered. There's only Thomas, they said. You'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now. So Thomas ran round to the front and back down on the coaches ready to start. "Don't be impatient," said his driver. "Wait till everything is ready." But Thomas was too excited to listen. What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train. Or perhaps the driver pulled the lever by mistake.
At last the day's work was done. The twins now became excited. They were going to use the turntable for the first time. Bill went first. "This is fun," he shrieked to Ben. He didn't want to move off at all. The foreman stopped the turntable. "Please make way for the other engines," he ordered. Bill did so, but unfortunately the foreman had accidentally stopped the turntable in the wrong place. Bill was on the wrong track and there was Ben puffing directly toward him. The engines came to a grinding halt. They gazed grimly at each other. "I was here first," said Bill. "But you're in my way," protested Ben. "You'll have to back up again." "I won't." "You will." "I won't." The Fat Controller came to stop the noise. "If you don't behave, I shall not allow you here again." The next day...
When they reached the harbour, they found everything in confusion. Trucks had been derailed, blocking the line, and stone slabs lay everywhere. "We must get these pilings past," said Thomas's driver. "They are essential. Trevor, we need you to drag them round this mess." "Just the sort of job I like," replied Trevor. "Now you'll see, Thomas. I'll soon show you what traction engines can do." Trevor was as good as his word. He dragged the pilings clear with chains and towed them into position. "Who needs rails?" he muttered cheerfully to himself. Later, Thomas brought Annie and Clarabelle to visit him.
Goodness.
Thomas was most impressed. "Now I understand how useful a traction engine can be."
Engine to replace you?
The coaches
He
were
would
full.
never do that, thought Thomas, but he was worried. Next day, Thomas hurried along the line. Just ahead was a goods yard. There, on the platform, was an inspector waving a red flag. Next, Thomas saw some children. They were waving too. Something must be wrong, thought Thomas. This station is for goods, not passengers. "Help, Thomas, help! We are glad to see you," called the children. "Please, will you take us home?" The station master explained to Thomas's driver that the school bus had broken down and that all the parents would be worried if the children were late. Thomas waited as the children walked down from the bridge. Then he took them to the next station, where Bertie was waiting to take them home. When Thomas finished his journey, he was very late. He was worried that the Fat Controller might be cross with him. "I warned Thomas," puffed Percy to James. "He's been late one time too many. He'll be in trouble now." A special visitor had arrived, but next morning, the Fat Controller was nowhere to be seen. Visitor had a look. He's coming now. Gordon's wheels pounded the rails. He did it, I'll do it. He did it, I'll do it. Gordon's train rocketed past and was gone. "He'll knock himself to bits," chuckled Duck. "Steady, Gordon," called his driver. "We aren't running a race." "We are, then," said Gordon, but he said it to himself. Suddenly, Gordon began to feel a little strange. "The top of my boiler seems funny," he thought. "It feels as if something is loose. I'd better go slower." But it was too late. On the viaduct, they met the wind. It was a teasing wind which blew suddenly in hard puffs. Gordon thought it wanted to push him off the bridge. "No, you don't," he said firmly. But the wind had other ideas. It curled around his boiler, crept under his loose dome, and lifted it off and away into the valley below. He bumped them hard. "That's for you, and you, and you." Trucks will be trucks, said James.
They won't with me, snorted Gordon. I'll teach them.
James got ready to take the express when Gordon returned. Be careful, warned Gordon. The hills are slippery and you may need help. I don't need help on hills, replied James huffily. Gordon thinks he knows everything. Earlier, a storm had swept Gordon's hill, blowing leaves onto the track. Even though the storm had passed, the hill was still difficult to climb. James knew this. The signal showed clear and James began to go faster. I'll do it, he puffed. Halfway up, he was not so sure. I must do it. But his wheels slipped on the leaves. He couldn't pull the train at all. Help, help, whistled James. His wheels were turning forward, but the heavy coaches pulled him backwards. The whole train started slipping down the hill. His driver shut off steam and put on the brakes. Then carefully, he stopped the train.
But he still thought about scarves. He saw them everywhere he went. My funnel's cold, he puffed. I want a scarf. Rubbish, Percy, said Henry. Engines don't wear scarves. Engines with proper funnels do, replied Percy. You've only got a small one. Before Henry could answer, Percy puffed away. Henry snorted. He was looking forward to pulling the special train. It was time for the photographs. Everyone was excited. The fat controller was waiting on the platform for his trousers. They were in a trunk amongst a big load of baggage. The porters were taking the baggage trolley across the line. They were walking backwards to see that nothing fell off. Percy was still being cheeky. His driver always shut off steam just outside the station. Percy wanted to surprise the coaches by coming in as quietly as he could. But the porters didn't hear him either. Boxes and
the
bags
station
burst
master had bad news. What's happened? Asked Percy's driver. James's brakes have jammed. We need Percy's help right away. Percy quickly set off to the rescue. He found James stuck on the line and looking glum. Percy couldn't help laughing. Got yourself in a jam, eh, James? What you might call a sticky situation. Be quiet, said James. It's not funny having jam brakes. And not very reliable either, teased Percy. I am surprised you let it happen, James. Nothing should stop us engines. That's enough, Percy, said his driver. Can you push these trucks? Of course I can, whistled Percy. There's no time to lose. James has done too much of that already. James angrily hissed steam as Percy was coupled to the trucks. Off we go, said Percy. I'll have to go fast to get there in time. These big engines are so unreliable. Be careful, Percy, called his driver, but Percy was in a hurry.
The driver said there's lots of boats for the village, said Thomas. I'll need an extra truck for it.
There's lots of boats for the village, said Thomas.
I'll need an extra truck
for it all. Percy was feeling left out. It's not fair. You're not leaving any posts for me. But Percy's chance had come. There's been a change of plan, said Thomas's driver. The fat controller needs us at the big station. Percy, you are to take Thomas's train to the village. Percy was delighted, but Thomas was sad. I won't be able to say Happy Christmas to all my friends. Don't worry, said Percy kindly. I'll do it for you. It's not the same, sighed Thomas. Percy was making good time on his way to the village when suddenly... What's that? Called his driver. There ahead was a fogman by the line. He was holding a red light. The village is cut off by snow, he shouted. We need snowplows, workmen and a helicopter. Leave your trucks in the sidings and go back quickly. Percy was soon steaming to Harold's airfield. Beep, beep, whistled Percy. Wake up, lazy wings. The mountain villagers need your help. They're stranded. Bertie and Butts was working harder than ever I like an emergency to keep me engines busy buzzed away. Now, sighed Percy, what's next? Suddenly, there was Thomas with Terence. The engines were preparing for the homeward rush. Where are the passengers? They wondered. Look, shrilled Oliver. Look at Bulgy. He's a mean scarlet deceiver. Bulgy was wearing a large sign saying Railway Bus. Yaboo Snubs! He jeered as he roared away. Come on. Puff ducked to his coaches. Let's see what he's up to. Duck wanted to pay Bulgy out, but he wasn't sure how. Then, in the distance, Duck saw a man waving a red flag. That meant danger. The line here crosses a narrow road, and there was Bulgy, wedged firmly under the bridge. So this was his shortcut, chuckled Duck. He tricked us, shouted Bulgy's passengers. He said he was a railway bus, but he wouldn't accept our return tickets. He wanted us to think railways are no good. The yard was in a dreadful muddle. The twins had let the trucks tell them where to put things. Gordon and the passengers waited impatiently outside the station, while Bill and Ben tried to sort things out. But by the time Gordon was able to leave, it was very late indeed. Next day, the twins were working at the quarry again. That's a strange noise, gasped Bill. I've never heard a noise like that before. I have, whispered his driver nervously. It sounds like a rock slide to me. Then came the alarm. Danger! Clear the quarry! Shouted the quarrymaster. Workmen scrambled into the trucks. Thank goodness we're here, said the twins. They were just puffing out of the quarry when word, Harold. Lots of boats, lots of races, great fun. I hover around in case I'm needed. Do you go to the horizon? Asked Duck. Yes, and beyond. I didn't know there was a beyond, whispered Percy. Do you go to other places at sea? Continued Duck. Certainly. I can land on ships, you know, anywhere, anytime. Goodbye. Duck sighed. He went on talking about the regatta all day. Percy lost patience. Well, Duck, I'd rather have my wheels on solid ground. Our rails can take us to all the places we could ever wish to see. That's an emergency, called Duck's driver. I'll check with the harbour master. He returned with bad news. A man taking part in the regatta has hurt his hand. We're to take him to the hospital at the next station. Harold's bringing him now. Come on. On, yelled the trucks. Oliver fought hard, but still they Good to see you again, Duck. Word Harold as he landed carefully on the platform. An example to us all. Helped to safety. I'm sorry to say that Oliver became very puffed up in the smoke box. Henry says I'm amazing. He's right. He whistled as he swooshed along the line. One day, the Fat Controller came to see him. You are doing well. Now, you must learn how to look after trucks. Every wise engine knows that you cannot trust trucks. The other engines warned Oliver, but he took no notice. You think I can't manage? He said huffily. Gordon knows better. He says I'm sagacious. You may be good gracious, or whatever you call it, but trucks can be troublesome and... Say no more, Duck, interrupted Donald. It's maybe a pity, but the wee engine will have to learn for himself. Oliver pulled some loaded trucks to a siding and pushed the empties to the chute.
Next, Edward took some empty trucks to the quarry. Percy was left alone. He didn't mind that a bit. He liked watching trains and being cheeky to the other engines. Hurry, 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 he would call, and they got very cross. After a great deal of shunting, Percy was waiting for the signalman to set the point so that he could get back to the yard. He was eager to work, but was being rather careless and not paying attention. Edward had warned Percy, "Be careful on the main line. Whistle to the signalman you are there." But Percy didn't remember to whistle, so the busy signalman forgot him. Percy waited and waited. The points were still against him, so he couldn't move. Then he looked along the main line. Peep, peep! He whistled in horror, for rushing straight towards him was Gordon with the express. "Oh!" groaned Gordon. "Get out of my way!" Percy opened his eyes. Gordon had stopped with Percy's buffers a few inches from his own. But Percy had begun to move. "I won't stay here. I'll run away," he puffed. He went straight through Edward's station and was so frightened that he ran right up Gordon's hill.
Hurrah, hurrah, laughed the trucks. We've broken away, we've broken away. Chase him, bump him, throw him off the rails, they yelled. Hurry, Duck, hurry, said the driver. They raced through Edward's station, but the trucks were catching up as fast as we can. Then they'll catch us gradually. The driver was gaining control. Another clear mile and we'll do it. Oh, glory, look at that! James was just pulling out on their line from the station ahead. Any minute there could be a crash. "It's up to you now, Duck," cried the driver. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam against the trucks. "It's too late," Duck groaned and shut his eyes. He veered into a siding where a barber had set up shop. He was shaving a customer. The silly trucks had knocked their guard off his van and left him far behind after he had whistled a warning. But the trucks didn't care. They were...
Even so, the Fat Controller decided that Gordon needed a rest.
James shall do your work.
James was delighted. He liked to show off his smart red paint and was determined to be as fast as Gordon. "You know, little Toby," he boasted, "I'm an important engine. Everyone knows it. I'm as regular as clockwork, never late, always on time."
Says you, replied Toby.
Just then, the Fat Controller arrived.
Your parts are worn, Toby, so you must go to the works to be mended.
"Can I take Henrietta, sir?"
No. What would the passengers do without her?
Thomas returned.
Toby saw Percy by the water tower. "Don't worry, Toby," said Percy. "I'll take care of Henrietta until you get back."
Thomas returned and he puffed away.
Soon Toby was out on the main line. He clanked as he
Thomas
trundled
returned
along.
and
He's a little
puffed
engine with
away.
small wheels. His tanks don't hold much water. I'm the pride
He had come
of
a
the
long
long way.
I saw you pulling trucks today. You're only a goods engine, snorted Gordon.
James was furious. "I pull coaches too."
Not as much as I do, grunted Gordon.
"The Fat Controller has plans for me." James was only making this up, but Gordon believed him.
What plans?
Wait and see. Oh dear, thought James. Now what'll I do? Thomas was shunting shining new coaches. "Good morning, James." "Are those coaches for me?" asked James hopefully. "No, these are for Gordon's Express. I'll fetch your trucks next." But James was going to play a trick on the other engines. "Actually, Thomas, I'm taking the coaches. The Fat Controller asked me to tell you." "What about the trucks?" Give them to Gordon,"
said Gordon. "Disgusting,"
"Come on, Thomas,"
said James. "Despicable," said Henry. "We cannot allow it." They consulted together. "Yes," they said. "He did it to us. We'll do it to him and see how he likes it." Duck was tired out. The trucks had been cheeky and troublesome. He wanted a rest in the shed.
past
The
the
three
word.
engines barred his way.
Hey, Percy, out! Hey, Percy, out! Come along, Puff Percy. No nonsense. We'll give him nonsense, giggled the trucks. But they followed so quietly that Percy thought they were under control. Suddenly, they saw a notice ahead. All trains stop to pin down brakes. Beep, beep, beep. Brakes, guard, please. But before he could check them, the trucks surged forward. On, they cried. Help, help, whistled Percy. The man on duty at the crossing rushed to warn traffic with his red flag, but was too late to switch Percy to the runaway siding. Frantically trying to grip the rails, Percy slid into the yard. Beep, beep, look out! The brake van was in smithereens. This is better, said Daisy. But whatever is that rubbish? The rubbish turned out to be Annie, Clarabelle, and Henrietta, who were most offended. We won't stay here to be insulted, they fumed. Percy and Toby had to take them away and spend half the night soothing their hurt feelings. The engines woke next morning feeling exhausted. Daisy, on the other hand, felt bright and cheerful. Ooh, ooh, she tooted as she came out of the yard and back to the station. Look at me, she purred to the passengers. I'm the latest diesel, highly sprung and right up to date. You won't want Thomas's bumpy old Annie and Clarabelle now. The passengers waited for Daisy to start, but she didn't. She saw that a milk van was about to be coupled to her and was most indignant. Do they expect me to pull that? Surely, said her driver, you can pull one van. I won't, said Daisy. Percy can do it. He loves messing about with trucks. She began to shudder violently. Nonsense, said her driver. Come on now, back down. Daisy lurched backwards. She was so cross that she blew a fuse. Told you, she said, and stopped. Everyone argued with her, but it was no use. It's fitter's orders, she said. What is? My fitter's... Percy found Toby at the quarry. I say, Toby, that Harold, that stuck-up whirlybird thing, says I'm slow and out of date. Just let him wait. I'll show him. He collected his trucks and started off, still fuming. Soon they heard a familiar buzzing. Percy, whispered his driver. There's Harold. He's not far ahead. Let's race him. Yes, let's, said Percy. Percy pounded along. The truck screamed and swayed. Well, I'll be a ding-dong-dang, said the driver. There was Harold. The race was on. Go it, Percy, he yelled. You're gaining. Percy had never been allowed to run fast before. He was having the time of his life. Hurry, 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 he panted to the trucks. We don't want to, they grumbled. It was no use. Percy was bucketing along with flying wheels, and Harold was high and alongside. The fireman shoveled for dear life. Well done, Percy, shouted the driver. We're gaining. We're going ahead. Oh, good to go out with. Good. When Thomas came back, Annie and Clarabelle told him how well Duck had managed. Thomas was so pleased to be home that he soon forgot to be jealous. The works had left Thomas's handbrake very stiff. It made his brakes seem as if they were hard on, when in fact they were not. As a result, he and his coaches often overran the platform. Thomas found this most embarrassing. Gradually, his driver and fireman learned to be extra careful. But one day, Thomas's fireman was ill, and a relief man took his place. The fireman had fastened the coupling and joined the driver and station master on the platform to wait for Henry's passengers. The fireman had forgotten all about Thomas's handbrake. Thomas simmered happily. Not long now, he thought, as he saw Henry slowly approaching. But Thomas's brakes were not hard on, and suddenly he felt his wheels begin to move. He tried to stop, but he couldn't without his driver and fireman. He tried to whistle a warning, but he couldn't do that either. The guard, driver, fireman, and passengers were all stranded on the platform. Stop! Stop! His driver laughed. Neither do I. It was a pretend ghost on television. Percy was disappointed. That evening, he came back from the harbour. Percy knew where he was, even in the dark. Crow's Farm Crossing. We shan't be long now. He liked running at night. The rails hummed and the signal lights shone green. But a broken cartload of lime lay ahead. Sam the farmer had just gone for help. Percy broke the cart to smithereens. Lime flew everywhere. He puffed quickly to the nearest signal box. Percy's driver explained what had happened. "I'll see to it," said the signalman, "but you'd better clean Percy, or people will think he's a ghost." Percy chuckled. "Do let's pretend I'm a ghost and scare Thomas. That'll teach him to say I'm a silly little engine." Toby promised to help. Thomas was being oiled up for his evening train. No. Percy's had an Donald
accident,
and Douglas were
cried
used
Toby.
to it.
Poor
Coupled back to back, with a van between their tenders and a snowplow on their fronts, they set to work. They puffed backwards and forwards, patrolling the line. Generally, the snow slipped away easily, but sometimes they found deeper drifts. Presently, they came to a drift which was larger than most. They charged it, and were just backing for another try when... "Lush sakes, Donald! It's Henry! Dinnot fetch yourself, Henry! Wait a while, we'll have you out." Henry was very grateful. He saw all was not well. The twins were glum. They told him that the Fat Controller was returning soon. "He'll send us back for sure." "It's a shame," said Percy. "A lot of nonsense about a broken signal box," grumbled Gordon. "That spiteful brake van too," put in James. "Good riddance, that's what I say." "They were splendid in the snow," added Henry. "It isn't fair." They all agreed that something must be done, but none knew what. They screamed. Percy decided to talk to Edward about it. "What you need," said Edward, "is a deputation." He explained what that was. Percy ran back quickly. "Trucks lighted to show off. Edward says we need a depositation of..." When Duck returned, Diesel was trying to take some trucks from a siding. They were old and empty. They had not been touched for a long time. Diesel found them hard to move. Pull! Push! Backwards!
forward! Oh!
The trucks groaned.
We can't! We won't!
Duck watched with interest. Diesel lost patience. He roared, gave a great heave. The trucks jerked forward. They screamed,
We can't! We won't!
some of their brakes snapped, and the gear jammed in the sleepers.
Chuckled Duck.
Diesel recovered and tried to push the trucks back, but they wouldn't move. Duck ran quietly round to collect the other trucks.
Thank you for arranging these, Diesel.
Green
I must
caterpillar
go now.
indeed,
Don't you want
fumed
this
Percy.
lot?
He set off to collect some hay to take to the harbour. Everyone says I'm handsome, or at least nearly everyone. Anyway, my curves are better than Thomas's corners. Thomas says I'm always late, he grumbled. I'm never late, or at least only a few minutes. What's that to Thomas? He can always catch up time further on. All the same, he and his driver decided to start home early. Then came trouble. A crate of treacle was upset all over Percy. Percy was cross. He was still sticky when he puffed away. The wind was blowing fiercely. "Look at that!" exclaimed the driver. The wind caught the piled hay, tossing it up and over the track. The lion climbed here. "Take a run at it, Percy," his driver advised. Percy gathered speed, but the hay made the rails slippery, and his wheels wouldn't grip. Time after time he stalled with spinning wheels, and had to wait till the line ahead was cleared before he could start again.
The next morning, James arrived.
Everyone was waiting. Thomas seethed
in
impatiently.
Buzz, 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 retorted Duck.
The next morning, James arrived at the station to collect his coaches. The passengers were excited and keen to get on board. The platform was crowded and the porter was in a hurry. "Mind your backs!" he shouted. Then there was trouble. The beehive fell and broke open. The station cleared like magic. James heard a familiar buzzing. The bees were too cold to be cross, so they buzzed around the fireman hoping he'd mend their hive, but he didn't understand, nor did his driver. So the bees turned to James. His boiler was nice and warm. "Buzz off! Buzz off!" hissed James. One bee burnt his foot. "Ooh, ah, phew, phew!" The bee thought James had burnt him on purpose.
Been rather unusual.
So
What
it stung
sort of
James.
something?
Wait and see.
Percy was moving trucks into a siding. Henry arrived with his goods train. The signalman switched the points and Percy waited on the siding until Henry had steamed by. Then there was trouble. "The points are jammed," called the signalman. "I can't switch them back. The workmen will mend them in the morning. It's too late now." Said Percy's driver. "I'm sorry, Percy, but you will have to stay here for the night." "Where are you going?" asked Percy. "Home for tea," replied the fireman. Percy was speechless. He watched as the other engines went home to the shed. Night time came and Percy began to feel very lonely. "Oh dear," he murmured, "it's very dark." Oh, what's that?" It was only an owl, but Percy didn't realise this. "I wish Thomas was here too," he sighed. Thomas was waiting for his mysterious load at the harbour. Suddenly, there it was. "Cinders and ashes," cried Thomas. "It's a dragon!" "Don't worry," laughed his driver. "This dragon is made of paper. It's for the carnival tomorrow." And then set off. Workmen lifted the dragon onto Thomas's low loader and put lights all around it for protection. Then Thomas set off into the misty night. Percy was asleep in his sidings and had no idea that Thomas was approaching him.
Was snorting about in the yard. It's too bad. Percy goes to work at the harbour and I do his job here, there and everywhere. Take that.
"Oh," groaned the trucks. "Just you wait, we'll show you." Gordon laughed. "I'll tell you what, James, if you pretended to be ill everywhere, you couldn't shunt trucks here or go to the quarry there, could you?" "What a good idea," agreed James. "Look, here comes Thomas. I'll start pretending now." Thomas was sorry to see the engines looking miserable. "Cheer up, it's a beautiful day." "Yes," grumbled Gordon, "but not for James." "What's the matter?" "He's sick," replied Gordon. "Yes, he is. I am," stuttered James. I don't feel well at all." "Don't worry," said Thomas kindly. "I'll help out if you're ill."
Come on, Henry, he would
Gordon
say.
and James sniggered quietly to each other.
By the forest.
Some of James's trucks were coupled
Come on,
behind Thomas,
Henry,
and he
would say.
steamed
We
away
make
to the
good
quarry.
time today. We'll stop for a while. By
The
the
trucks were still cross. "We
Come
couldn't
on,
pay
Henry,
James
he
back
would
for
say.
bumping us,
We've
so
made
we'll
good
play
time
tricks on
today."
Thomas instead. One engine is as good as
By
another."
morning,
The fierce winds had gone, but the damage was done. Henry's driver came to see him in the yard. "Trees have fallen on the line. We must help clear the tracks." Donald set off with the breakdown train, and Henry followed. Trees lay everywhere. The hillside now looked so bare. Henry felt sad. What will happen to all the animals who live here, he thought. When Henry's flat trucks were full of logs, he took them to the timber mill, where they would be turned into furniture and other things. Henry was glad the wood was being put to good use, but he was still sorry to lose part of his forest.
Percy and Duck were sulking in their shed.
"Oh dear," sighed Toby. "I wish there was something we could do to make things better again." Suspiciously. "Where?" "Yes,
Why, from
indeed,"
here to
replied
there?"
Tom. "Purred Diesel. And again from there to here. Easy, isn't it?" With that, Diesel, as if to make himself quite clear, bumped some trucks hard. "Woo!" screamed the trucks. "Grrr," growled Diesel. Percy and Duck were horrified. They did not trust Diesel at all. They refused to work and would not leave their shed. The Fat Controller was enjoying his tea and ice bun when the telephone rang. "So there's trouble in the harbour yard? I'll be there right away." Diesel was working loudly and alone. Cargo lay on the quay. Ships and passengers were delayed. Everyone was complaining about the Fat Controller's railway. Percy and Duck were sulking in their shed. "What's all this?" demanded the Fat Controller. We're on strike, sir," said Percy. "Yes," added Duck. "Beg pardon, sir, but we won't work with Diesel, sir." Then, in a quiet, hurt voice, he added, "You said you'd sent him packing, sir." "I have to give Diesel a second chance. I am trying to help you by bringing Diesel here. Now you must help me. He was the only engine available." Percy and Duck.
Thomas grew crosser and crosser. "Time's time," he grumbled. "Why should I keep my passengers waiting while Henry and James dawdle about all day on viaducts?" "Don't blame me," snorted Henry. "If we hurried across the viaduct, it might collapse, and then you'd have no passengers at all. What would you do then?" "Run my train on time, for one thing," retorted Thomas. He hurried away before Henry could answer. Bertie was impatient too. He was timed to arrive just after Thomas. His passengers found that instead of going straight from the bus to their train, they were kept waiting till Thomas arrived. Soon Bertie grew cross with Thomas. Late again, he remarked, as Thomas panted wearily in. We may be friends, but I thought you could go fast, Thomas. It's time we had another race. I reckon I could beat you now. Thomas let off steam loudly. Rubbish, he hissed fiercely. It's those mainline engines. They dither about on their viaduct and then blame the fat controller's workmen. It's just an excuse for laziness, if you ask me.
Himself.
Percy
One
said
day,
more.
James
He
was
just
later
grinned
than ever
and
at
told
the
me.
junction. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was loading his trucks full of coal. Thomas was still being cheeky. Careful, he warned. Watch out with those silly trucks. Go on, go on, go on, muttered the trucks. And by the way, went on Thomas, those buffers don't look very safe to me. The last load poured down. Help! I'm choking! Cried Thomas. Get me out! Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. Ha ha, chuckled Percy. You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful. I'm not disgraceful, choked Thomas. You did that on purpose. Get me out. It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train.
His driver stopped the train. What has happened to me? Asked Gordon. I feel so weak. You've burst your safety valve, said the driver. You can't pull the train anymore. Oh dear, said Gordon. We were going so nicely too. And look, there's Henry laughing at me. Everyone came to see Gordon. Huh, said the fat controller. I never liked these big engines. Always going wrong. Send for another engine at once. While the guard went to find one, they uncoupled Gordon, who had enough puff to slink onto the siding out of the way. Edward was the only engine left. I'll come and try, he said. Huh, said Gordon. That's no use. Edward can't push the train. Edward puffed and pushed and pushed and puffed, but he couldn't move the heavy coaches. I told you so, said Gordon. Hey, why not let Henry try? The other engines
Yes,
can
said the
manage.
fat
They
controller.
have big fireboxes. Henry's is small and can't make the heat. With Welsh coal, he'd be a different engine. It's expensive, said the fat controller, but Henry must have a fair chance. James shall go and fetch some. When the Welsh coal came, Henry's driver and fireman were excited. Now we'll show them, Henry, old fellow. They carefully made his fire, putting large lumps of coal like a wall round the outside. Then the glowing middle part was covered with smaller lumps. You're spoiling my fire, complained Henry. Wait and see, said the fireman. We'll have a roaring fire, just when we want it. The fireman was right. When Henry reached the platform, the water was boiling nicely, and he had to let off steam. How are you, Henry? Beep, beep, whistled Henry. I feel fine. Have you a good fire, driver? There's a Never
good
better,
engine.
sir, and
You
plenty
and
of
Toby
steam.
will
Managed splendidly. Thomas charged the snowdrifts fiercely. Sometimes he swept them aside, sometimes they stuck fast, and the men had to loosen them. But at the cutting near the cottage, they could go no further. Look at that, exclaimed Thomas's fireman. Peep, peep, peep. Here we are, whistled Thomas. An answering wave came from an upstairs window. Then they heard a familiar sound. That's Terence, said Thomas. He's come to help too. Sure enough, Terence had a snowplow and was working hard to clear a path to the railway line in safety. At long last, the rescue was complete. Percy took the tired workmen home. Terence said goodbye to Mrs. Kindly and promised to take care of her cottage as he watched them all set off. The engines made good time. No more snow had fallen, but the yard was dark. Thomas's heart sank.
That is better, that is better.
Suddenly, all the lights went on. What a marvelous sight awaited Mrs. Kindly. Well done, said the Fat Controller. I'm really proud of you all. Mrs. Kindly especially thanked the smaller engines. Thomas and Toby are old friends, she said. And now, Percy, you onto the cold air, and the fire's light shone brightly. Hurry, 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 panted Henry. They were going well. The light grew better. Signal light shone green as they passed. Then, a yellow signal appeared ahead. His driver prepared to stop, but the home signal was down. All clear, Henry. Away we go. They couldn't know the points from the main line to a siding were frozen, and the home signal should have been set at danger, but snow had forced it down. A goods train was waiting in the siding to let the flying kipper pass, and the driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the brake van. The kipper is due, said the guard. Who cares, said the fireman. This is good cocoa. The driver got up. Come on, fireman, back to our engine. They got out just in time. Henry's driver and fireman had jumped clear before the crash, but Henry lay dazed and surprised.
They had to go back to let the passengers out, but no one seemed to know about the Fat Controller's top.
The Fat Controller came to see him. I must go. I don't know what the Fat Controller would do without me to run this branch line, and he puffed off importantly. Edward and James passed the field where James had had his accident. The fence was mended and the cows were back again. They ended their journey and rested before setting off for home. James was still wondering what the Fat Controller would have to say about his top hat. Next morning, the Fat Controller spoke severely to him. If you can't behave, I shall take away your red coat and have you painted blue. James didn't like that at all. He was very rough with the grumbling coaches as he brought them to the platform. Don't talk, come on, he called to them. Gordon never has to fetch his own coaches, he thought to himself, and he's only painted blue. To make James even more cross, Thomas was coupled on and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. Hurry, 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 he puffed. He wasn't pretending to be like Gordon, he really meant it. Bother those trucks and their tricks. I hope poor James isn't hurt. James's driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt. Never mind, James, they said. It wasn't your fault. It was those wooden brakes they gave you. We always said they were no good. Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled the unhurt trucks out of the way. Oh dear, they groaned. Serves you right, puffed Thomas. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon. This'll teach you a lesson, he told the trucks. And they answered, yes it will, yes it will. They left the broken trucks, then with 2 cranes they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him. Meanwhile, Gordon screeched along the line. The noise was awful. At the station, everyone held their ears. The Fat Controller held his ears too. "Take him away," he bellowed, "and stop that noise!" Gordon puffed sadly away, but he wouldn't stop whistling until 2 fitters climbed up and knocked his whistle valve in place.
At first, the trucks behaved well.
That night, Gordon slunk into the shed. He was glad it was empty.
The trucks behaved well, but James...
It isn't wrong, murmured Henry to no one in particular, but we just don't do it. No one mentioned whistles. Next morning, went redder than ever and snorted off. It was such an insult to be reminded of the time a bootlace had been used to mend a hole in his coaches. At the end of the line, James left his coaches and got ready for his next train. It was a slow goods, stopping at every station to pick up and set down trucks. James hated slow goods trains. Dirty trucks from dirty sidings. Blech! Starting with only a few, he picked up more and more trucks at each station till he had a long train. At first, the trucks behaved well, but James bumped them so crossly that they were determined to pay him back. Presently, they approached the top of Gordon's Hill. Heavy goods trains halt here to pin down their brakes. James had had an accident with trucks before and should have remembered this. "Wait, James, wait," said the driver, but James wouldn't wait. He was too busy thinking what he would say to Toby when they next met. The truck's chancellor could hardly believe their ears. "He's dreadfully rude. I feel quite ashamed. I feel quite ashamed. He's dreadfully rude." And to Thomas they said, "You mustn't be rude. You make us ashamed." But Thomas didn't care a bit. "That was funny. That was funny," he chuckled. He felt very pleased with himself. Annie and Clarabelle were deeply shocked. They had great respect for Gordon, the big engine. Thomas left the coaches at the station and went off to a mine for some trucks. Long ago, miners digging for lead had made tunnels under the ground. Their roofs are strong enough to hold up trucks, but not the weight of engines. A large notice warns them not to enter the area. "Danger! Engines must not pass this board." Silly old board, thought Thomas. He had often tried to pass it, but had never succeeded. But this morning he had made a plan. Said Thomas. The fireman went to turn the... "Never mind," said his driver. "We'll get some water from the river." They found a bucket and some rope and went to the bridge. Then the driver let the bucket down to the water. The bucket was old and had 5 holes. So they had to fill it, pull it up and empty it into Thomas's tank as quickly as they could, several times over. finished at last. That's good, puffed Thomas, and Annie and Clarabelle ran happily behind. Toby will help. Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The new engine arrived. What's your name? Asked the fat controller. Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck. They say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague. Good. Duck it shall be. Here, Percy, show Duck round. The two engines went off together. Soon they were very busy. James, Gordon, and Henry watched Duck quietly doing his work. He seems a simple sort of engine. We'll have some fun and order him about. Fast yourself, Thomas. We'll soon have you back on the rails. Whee! Smoke billowed everywhere. Dinner, fast yourself, Thomas. We'll soon have you back on the rails. He boasted Percy to the others. Duck took... Driver says I don't need him now. Don't be so daft, snorted Percy. I'd never go without my driver, said Toby earnestly. I'd be frightened. Huh, boasted Thomas. I'm not scared. You'd never dare. I would then. You'll see. The next morning, the firelighter came. Thomas drowsed comfortably as the warmth spread through his boiler. Percy and Toby were still asleep. Thomas suddenly remembered. Silly stick in the muds, he chuckled. I'll show them. Driver said I could manage without him. I'll just go out. Then I'll stop and wheesh! That'll make them jump. Thomas thought he was being clever. Really, he was only moving because a careless cleaner had meddled with his controls. He soon found his mistake. He tried to wheesh, but he couldn't. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. He just kept rolling along. Thomas was looking at the board. Didn't dare look at... Danger! We mustn't go past it, he said. That's orders. Why? Danger means falling down something, said Thomas. I went past danger once and fell down a mine. I can't see a mine, said Percy. He didn't know that the foundations of the quay had sunk. The rails now sloped downward to the sea. Stupid board, said Percy. Percy made a plan. One day he whispered to the trucks, will you give me a bump when we get to the quay? The trucks had never been asked to bump an engine before. They giggled and chatted about it. Driver doesn't know my plan, chuckled Percy. On, laughed the trucks. Percy thought they were helping. I'll pretend to stop at the station, but the trucks will push me past the board. Then I'll make them stop. I can do that whenever I like. Every wise engine knows that you cannot trust. James's driver and fireman could not make him move. The other engines grumbled dreadfully. They had to do James's work as well as their own. At last the inspector arrived. Show a wheel, James. You can't stay here all day. The fat controller told me to stay here. He sent a message this morning. He did not. How could he? He's away for a week. Oh, said James. Oh, where's Percy? Percy had wisely disappeared. When the fat controller came back, he did see James and Percy too. Both engines wished he hadn't. One morning, Percy was careless. I say, you engines, I'm to take some trucks to Thomas's Junction. The fat controller chose me especially. He must know I'm a really useful engine. More likely he wants you out the way, grunted James. Gordon looked across to James. They were making about them in our shed. James and I were just... Coughs and sneezels spread diseasels. You had a cough in your smoke box yesterday. It's your fault the diseasel came. It isn't. It is. Stop arguing, you two, laughed their drivers. Let's go and rescue our trucks. Bill and Ben were horrified. But the diesel will magic us away like the trucks. He won't magic us, replied their drivers. We'll more likely magic him. Listen, he doesn't know you're twins, so we'll take away your names and numbers, and then this is what we'll do. Puffing hard, the twins set off on their journey to find the diesel. They were looking forward to playing tricks on him. Creeping into the yard, they found the diesel on a siding with the missing trucks. Ben hid behind, but Bill went boldly alongside. The guard blew his whistle till he had no more breath and waved his flag till his arms ached, but Henry still stayed in the tunnel and blew steam at him. I'm not going to spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes for you. Then along came Sir Topham Hatt, the man in charge of all the engines on Sodor. They call him the Fat Controller. We will pull you out, said the Fat Controller, but Henry only blew steam at him. Everyone pulled except the Fat Controller, because, he said, my doctor has forbidden me to pull. But still Henry stayed in the tunnel. Then they tried pushing from the other end. The Fat Controller said, 1, 2, 3, push! But he didn't help. My doctor has forbidden me to push, he said. They pushed and pushed and pushed, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. At last Thomas came along. The guard waved his red flag and stopped him. Everyone argued with Henry. Look, it has stopped raining, they said. Yes, and it will begin again soon, said Henry. And what would become of my green paint with red stripes then? Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last he caught up with James. Steady, Edward, called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engine swayed and lurched. At last! Got him! He shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine's speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. So the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward. I am sorry, whispered James. Thank you for saving me. You were splendid, Edward. That's all right, replied Edward. The engines arrived at the station side by side. The Fat Controller was waiting. A fine piece of work, he said. James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your worn parts mended. Oh, thank you, sir, said Edward. It'll be lovely not to clank